Hello everyone. In this video, we'll learn about trade remedies in WTO. So what are trade remedies? Trade remedies are permissible import restraints that would otherwise be contrary to WTO principles. So we learned in the WTO video that WTO stands for free trade and that there should be no restraints on import or export. But are there certain circumstances where these restraints would be admissible, or is it a blanket ban on imposing any sort of restraints on imports or exports? So this is the question, and trade remedies basically mean that there are exceptions in the world where countries feel that they do need to impose certain restraints on imports, otherwise it will have a very bad impact on their domestic industries. When such admissible WTO trade restraints are imposed, they are called trade remedies. So basically, essentially, they are exceptions to the bedrock rules of binding tariffs and MFN that we talked about earlier. So which means that normally WTO says that your tariffs should be fixed and you should not be increasing them, and you have to give equal treatment to all your trading partners, or in fact all countries under the MFN. So these trade remedies are an exception to these two rules. So now why would WTO allow something like that? It is basically designed to allow relief from imports deemed unfair. That is, if let us say you have any game has basically certain rules. So if everybody plays fair, then the umpire makes sure that everybody plays fair. But what if somebody is playing unfair and the umpire has no control over that person? So what the umpire can do is tell the other team also that, okay, I will relax some rules for you because this team is playing unfairly, and I will allow you certain things which I would have otherwise not allowed. So that is basically just what we are talking about. Or also there could be sometimes a sudden surge in imports which could have a very bad impact on the domestic producers. Even in that case, WTO says that okay, because there are many countries, part of like all the countries almost, and all the major countries, and if there's a poor country and let us say the farming community, which is relatively the more poorer of the communities in any country, so let us say the sudden surge in imports is hitting the farmers directly, so the countries would feel that okay, we need to protect our farmers from this sudden surge in imports, because otherwise they feel that why is it called a safety valve to allow further trade liberalization? Because if these safeguards are not given, then the countries will feel that okay, the WTO regime is so restrictive that we cannot really do anything good for our people, and it is better to not be part of WTO. So what are the trade remedies? There are three major trade remedies. One is safeguard measures, anti-dumping duties, and countervailing duties. So before we move on to the specifics of these three measures, just to give you some data, 254 safeguard proceedings were initiated between 1995 and 2012. Similarly, 4,209 anti-dumping proceedings were initiated, and 301 countervailing duties proceedings were initiated. As you can see, anti-dumping proceedings have been the most popular, and it's quite a significant number. So why is this this number increasing so much, or why is this high usage? First of all, as more and more tariffs are reduced or eliminated, so the trade is becoming freer. So any unfair thing that is done by another country impacts the other countries a lot more. So countries have felt the need to invoke these safeguards, these kind of provisions. Who are the major users of anti-dumping? Because anti-dumping we can see has a very high number. India is the largest user of anti-dumping measures, followed by USA, EU, and the country against whom most times anti-dumping have been used is China. Now for some details. What is an anti-dumping duty? This is imposed to counteract dumping. Now what is dumping? Dumping is a situation where the exporter is selling goods in an export market at a price lower than those same goods that are sold in the home market. So let us say China, we'll talk in dollar terms. Let us say China is producing, let us say some shoes, which it is selling for, let us say $50 in China. But if in India, it tries to sell those products at $30, then that can come under the case of dumping. Now why would China do this? Obviously because it wants to capture the Indian market, it wants to drive the Indian producers out of the market so that it can capture the entire market and become the monopoly supplier. Now obviously India cannot allow to do this, because just because Chinese companies or China in general has deep pockets, we cannot allow all our companies to go out of business in that particular product. So what you do is you impose anti-dumping duties. So for only products, that particular product coming from that particular country. So shoes coming from China, will get X% of duty. So when the price comes, the final price for the consumers is in the same range as it would have sold in China. So this is the basic concept. In case of countervailing duties, what happens is countervailing and duty. So countervailing means a balancing. So balancing duty. What are you balancing? If in a foreign country there is some product which they are able to sell in your market at a lower price only because of a subsidy that they are getting from their government. So you need to counterbalance or balance that particular subsidy that company is receiving from their government. So again, to take the previous example forward, so let us say the Chinese are producing shoes and they get a subsidy of $20 on that particular shoe for export. So they produce at $50 but get the $20 from the government. So effectively they can sell those shoes for $30 in India. Now again, we need to impose countervailing duty because we need to balance that subsidy. Safeguard measures allow countries to temporarily suspend tariff concessions to give domestic industry breathing room necessary to adjust to increased import competition. So like I said, there's a sudden surge in imports. It's not that somebody is playing unfair here. There's a sudden surge. Now because of that sudden surge, our domestic producers could get really very badly hampered. So there are certain conditions which are specified in WTO under which you can temporarily suspend tariff concessions or basically impose tariffs or do some things which would otherwise not be allowed. These are called safeguard measures. So what is a subsidy? Subsidy is a financial contribution by the government in which a benefit is conferred and it is specific to some industry. This is just to tell you that this is where the countervailing duties come into picture. Okay, there are three kinds of subsidies. First are totally prohibited subsidies, which are the so-called red lights. So you cannot give a company export subsidies that okay, you export this much and in return I will give you this much money. Or subsidies for import substitution, that okay, if you produce this product which we are otherwise importing, then we will give you subsidies so for each unit of import substituted. That is again something you cannot do. There are certain actionable subsidies which are the yellow lights, which are okay in some cases, not okay in others. You need to demonstrate serious prejudice to your industry. That is, let us say India is taking action against China. India has to show that this particular subsidy is causing serious damage to India. So these could be something like government financing or beneficial tax rates to particular industries. Why is this? Why is the difference? In beneficial tax rates, it is difficult to say that because of the beneficial tax rates are to the industry as a whole. So let us say we say that our leather industry is very prime for us, so we are giving a tax rebate to the leather industry compared to the industry in general. Now whether that tax rebate is being used for exporting or not, that is to be shown. But if it is an export subsidy, it's obvious that that subsidy is being used for exporting, so for hurting the foreign country. And there are certain non-actionable subsidies, the so-called green light, like R&D assistance, facility adaptation for environmental regulation. Those kind of things are okay, considered okay by WTO. Okay, there are certain differences between these two groups. So anti-dumping and countervailing duties on one hand and safeguards on the other. So in anti-dumping and countervailing duties, what happens is you're counteracting unfair trade practices by a particular country in a particular product. So hence you would impose anti-dumping duties or countervailing duties. In safeguards, it's not an unfairness, it's just a sudden surge of imports. So in the first group, you need to prove allegations of unfairness. It must be targeting individual countries. So like we said that okay, we are saying that China is doing something improper and hence we need to impose anti-dumping or countervailing duties. But in safeguards again, it's for all sources. It's not for a particular country. It's like from anywhere. If let us say wheat is coming into my country, because wheat imports have suddenly surged and then it could hurt my economy. So this is what we are talking about. And in anti-dumping and countervailing, you need to show only material injury. So some injury, if you can show, it's okay because they are effectively already doing something which is unfair. But in safeguards, you need to show that it is causing a very, very serious harm to your economy. Otherwise, if there is a surge in imports, so be it, because WTO is not there to make sure that whether you import or not. That is not really WTO's job. Going further, in anti-dumping and CVD, the remedy is limited to the amount of dumping or subsidization. So if you are saying that China is, let us say, subsidizing it to the extent of 10%, you can impose a countervailing duty of 10%. So it's very quantitative in nature. But in safeguards, because it's from all sources, you cannot know from where all it is coming, why it is coming, how it is getting affected. So these remedies are more flexible in nature. In AD and CVD, you have to make a very precise quantitative calculation and prove it to WTO, and then precise countervailing or anti-dumping measures can be taken. AD and CVD can last forever, although you need to reevaluate for every 5 years. So because if China doesn't stop the unfair measures, let us say, I'm just taking China as an example, so you can continue to have these measures for the rest of eternity. But in safeguard, it's a very short duration thing, mostly 3 years, because it is said that it is assumed that this surge in import has happened because of a very specific reason, which you may or may not understand, but it is not expected to last for a lifetime. If it does last for a very long time, that would mean that some underlying basics of the trade has changed, and you need to adapt to those. You cannot take recourse to the safeguard measures and say that we can't help it, their imports are high, we need these measures. These are only for a short episodic kind of shocks, basically. Now, what are the similarities in all these three? Obviously, these cases are usually brought up by domestic industries which are struggling to compete with the imports. If the domestic industry is competing well with the imports, then the need for any of these will not really arise. Secondly, normally it is triggered by an increase in imports. So if everything is status quo, you would not need any of these, and you would also not be able to prove the need for any of these. So if India was importing 100 shoes per year, and next year also it imports, let us say, 100 or 105 or 5-10% increase, then how will you prove that some country is adopting unfair trade practices? It could be, but normally it is that suddenly China decides that, okay, I'm going to start dumping in India, and hence I will sell the shoes at a much cheaper rate, wherein you would require one of these things. Secondly, in all of these, some degree of injury to the domestic industry has to be demonstrated. If it is not hurting you, then why would you be allowed to take any measures against that thing? So that is the basic principle of WTO, which requires you to prove that there is some injury to your industry. Thank you for watching the video. Hope you liked it. Comments and suggestions welcome. Thank you.